The timeline surrounding the deadly final year of Dr. Anna Sorenson's life is really difficult to sort out. Like, share, subscribe. I have got to get to Chicago and figure this out. Now, according to the Homicide in Chicago Interactive Database, a 22-year-old homemaker named Margaret died at American Hospital on November 12, 1917, from an abortion perpetrated by Dr. Anna Sorenson. Now, Sorenson had been implicated in the January 2nd death of Margaret Crow, but for some reason the Homicide in Chicago Interactive Database said she died January 2nd, 1918. This is going to be tricky. Now, previously in August, Sorenson had been implicated in the death of a young woman named Amelia, and so we got 3 abortion deaths. Sorenson died in her Chicago jail cell on November 12th or 13th, evidently from poisoning. It looks like she committed suicide. But she died in 1917. Now, she died on November 12th, and Margaret died on November 12th. That was awfully fast for her to get arrested and kill herself. And she'd already been dead when Margaret died in January. Now, either the Homicide in Chicago Interactive Database is wrong and Margaret died in 1917, or Margaret was hospitalized and she lingered until January 2nd of 1918. Like, share, subscribe. I want to get to Chicago and really, really dig through the records and find out what happened. And we've got another abortion death today with another habitual abortionist who just seemed to be able to practice in spite of the fact that she should not have been at large. This was a German immigrant named Mary, let's pronounce this, Murawski, Murawski. Sorry, Polish people, I find Polish names really tricky. Now, she was a 75-year-old German immigrant who could barely read and write English, but she'd worked as an unlicensed midwife for decades. Now, on November 1st, approximately, of 1952, she was approached by a former neighbor of hers. And this woman, Mrs. Castronova, was concerned about her 22-year-old daughter, Isabella. Isabella's no-count husband had abandoned her and her child and was not providing any kind of support. And Isabella was pregnant again. So Mrs. Castronova, who evidently knew that this midwife was an abortionist, for reasons you'll see in a minute, asked if she'd do an abortion. Now, Murawski said that she was busy that day, but she'd do the abortion the next day for a fee of $5, which was about $485 in 2020 dollars. So Isabella went to Murawski's practice the next day, which is probably at her home. Murawski inserted a hard rubber catheter into Isabella's uterus and told her to leave it there overnight. Now, by the 1950s, this abortion technique had been falling out of favor, but it wasn't some weird, flaky, criminal abortionist technique. It was an accepted method. But there it kind of goes south, because the next day Murawski went to the home where Isabella lived with her mother and child, pulled out the catheter, and administered a douche. Oh, let's just take all the vaginal flora and wash it up into the uterus. Why the hell not? This, of course, caused an infection, and Isabella was admitted to Swedish Memorial Hospital in Rockford. Now, while Isabella was in the hospital, her brother Vincent was called to her bedside. And he found her in a lot of pain. She was having trouble breathing. And she told him that Mrs. Murawski was responsible for her death. The family called in a priest to administer last rites. So Isabella clearly realized that she was dying. Now, after she died on November 12th, Paul Van Pernis performed an abortion an abortion, an autopsy, and verified that she had been pregnant and had been healthy. There was no legitimate reason to perform an abortion. And this is something that was always important on autopsy, because if a doctor performed an abortion in a good faith effort to save a woman's life because she had some condition that made pregnancy dangerous, you would not prosecute. It was legal. And this is something I hear the abortion rights movement say all the time, that prior to legalization, doctors were required to just let women die. They weren't allowed to do anything. No, that's not true. If a doctor in good faith felt that an abortion was necessary to try to save the mother's life, it was legal everywhere to do it. Even if it wasn't on the books as legal, they wouldn't prosecute. And it was a legitimate defense if you went to court. And a lot of doctors, went in and said, look, she had these health problems, that's why I did the abortion, and the case was dropped, or he was acquitted. So don't buy into this idea that doctors were forced to sit on their hands if they thought that an abortion was necessary to save the mother's life. Now, the abortion did cause an infection. The infection damaged Isabella's kidneys and liver, and that's what caused her death. Now, 2 policewomen questioned Marzocchi and prepared a written statement, which they then read to her, and Marzocchi signed it. And an assistant state's attorney interrogated her, and she signed a typed transcript of the interrogation. So she kind of admitted it. Now, she had already done time for a non-fatal abortion in the 1940s, and she had been implicated in an abortion death in 1928. Now, because she pretty much admitted to it in front of everybody, and of course Isabella's mother told about it, Murawski, was convicted of the abortion, but not homicide, just the abortion, and got a 5 to 10 year prison sentence. Now, she appealed her conviction on the grounds that in her deathbed statement to her brother, Isabella had only said that Murawski was responsible for her death, not specifically that she perpetrated the abortion. And the appeal said she was convicted of abortion, not of killing her. Therefore, the conviction has to be thrown out. And the court said, no, the abortion caused her death. So if Isabella said that Murawski was responsible for her death, obviously she had perpetrated the abortion. So the conviction was upheld.